Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Design Code series, a podcast where we chat about how AI, data, and design are shaping our world. Think of this as a space to explore how these technologies influences our surroundings, from homes to cities. I'm your host, Seyran Khademi, an AI scientist and fellow architecture enthusiast. Welcome to another episode of the Design Code series. This one is called the Delft Code. It's about the architecture school, AI and data, and I'm very happy to be joined by Georg Vrachliotis, professor of theory and history of architecture at Delft University of Technology and the newly appointed head of the Department of Architecture at Delft. Georg has spent a lot of time thinking about how technology and architecture shape each other. He looks at design, media, and theory not just as separate things, but as pillars of bigger story. In our chat, we dig into how AI isn't just a new fancy tool, but a new force for us to think about how to teach and think about design. Today, we are sitting at this newly established lab at the Faculty of Architecture to practice data in architectural design. And I think this place is very well suited to the conversation that we are going to have, Georg. Thank you so much for joining me.
Happy to be here.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation, Georg, because I think and I hope that what we talk about and what we are going to shed light on would be a new way for us to think about how technology is shaping the discipline of architecture. And I hope that it makes it also brighter for our listeners. How is the interplay between technology and architecture at the age of AI? Let's kick off things with a question about how architecture fits into today's tech-driven world. And I call this looking back to look forward. And I'm going to refer to your book, The New Technological Condition. And you describe how architecture has historically negotiated its position at the intersection of science and technology. And I can totally relate to that. I was at Architecture Biennale last weekend.
Great.
And you could see actually that there are so many things into architecture and this very interdisciplinary nature of this field. And the question now is that with this new technology, very powerful, right? A new force. There are so many things that are going to change. And the technology itself also blurring the line between public and science. We are using the technology in our every, basically, daily tasks. And the question I have for you is that as an architect and as a someone who has been thinking about these questions, about how technology is going to change the discipline. What question is urgent here? So what architects need to ask themselves right now at this very moment that this technology is changing so fast? And there is a really bigger agency for architecture, this cultural project of architecture, and this force from technology. How do you see this interplay? What question do they need to ask right now?
Well, thanks, Sharon, for the nice intro. I think you already mentioned a few core aspects. And of course, it's an ongoing process. So whatever I say, whatever we discuss can be different tomorrow. But there's one thing you just mentioned at the beginning, which is basically historically, architects love to shape technology through society. So I think it was always the other way around, that it's not the question, how can we apply tech to architecture, or how can we integrate a new tool or a new tech into our discipline. It's more the question, how can we shape tech together through society? And I think that society is the big arena architects always used to operate. Well, you ask for the what's new. Many things are new, of course, but not everything. So I think one of the new aspects basically is that, and that's the urgency you just mentioned, for architects, and also how we deal with the new tech, is that we design a world, we design the built environment, and now suddenly, more or less suddenly, the world designs back. So suddenly we are part of a feedback loop. We used to design things, and then okay, there's a building, there's an object, there's something. But now we have the feeling design comes back, and the world is also designing us. And I think this is what, let's say, I would call the conversational turn in tech. That we as architects, as designers, who used to shape the built environment in one direction, basically became the center of, let's say, a conversational world where we are always in conversation with tech, with software.
A question here, because you said that things has changed, but not everything. And I feel like this feedback system has been there for a long time, but it's just so fast right now. And it's like a matter of adapting to this speed.
Yes. Of course, always boring to say, yeah, there's history. But in a way, the idea of the feedback loop, or the feedback itself, goes back to, let's say, cybernetics in the 50s and 60s. And of course, back then you could say it was a mathematical theory or a societal concept. It was basically a diagram. Think of the black and white diagrams of the 50s and 60s. It was a worldview. But today, this worldview has been applied to us, to society. So I think we're operating in the concepts of the 60s. And the feedback, of course, has a long tradition. But now, as you said, it's everyday culture. We used to have a chat with phones, with all kinds of bots. We think together. And this has an impact in a way of on how we define ourselves as designers.
Okay, so then the question the architect would need to ask before designing something is that already thinking about the feedback in a near future. So what would this building or this plan would do in this, let's say, techno scene, I would say. So how would technology fit into really this space that I have created or I have imagined to be there, like in I don't know, 2-5 years? Is that a question that an architect needs to focus on?
In a way, yes. But let's separate for a second the building from the workflow of building.
Okay, that's a good one. Yeah.
So buildings, let's say, are very slow media, inhabiting media in a way, which, well, has to do with the pace of building, but also with the fact that it's about space, physical space. And physical space is a slow medium. While the workflow is changing constantly in a way. New tools, need to be reflected, applied. So I think AI, for example, is affecting right now the workflow a lot. While the building itself, if you want to sound conservative, is more like a building is a building is a building. Well, now the next interesting question is, how can we rethink the building in the age of AI? Or how can we rethink building as a verb? So I think buildings and workflows are the two main, let's say, operational fields for us where we have to develop new questions.
And if you talk about the workflow, then I'm thinking about the design knowledge. Is that correct? Is that something that is being produced during this process of building as a verb?
Design knowledge.
Yeah, the design knowledge.
Yeah, I would say design knowledge, design methodology, design collaboration, co-designing, co-creation. I think the core is quite key to let's say, redefine and resharpen the workflow for the future.
Yeah. So you think that the, let's say, first impact of this technology would not be maybe not very visible in a short, let's say, future in the building itself, but the way we design. And this is exactly what we teach and how we operate in Design Institute and architectural schools, right? So this is about what to teach to the students, how to teach to the students, given that new condition. And to me, is also about the design data literacy. And I think also in one of your essays, you talk about architecture's long search for cultural form that matches the structural form of the computation. So with AI models being a new vessel of design memory and prediction, how do you think the very form of this design knowledge is changing? So we acknowledge the change. Yeah. Now we want to speculate, nothing very serious, a speculation. So how do you see the shift, let's say, from the computational design era to what you see now in, everyday interaction that you have with the students, with the policymakers at design institutes, etc.? Is it something that you feel like, okay, this seems to be the trend? I found some patterns here, and then you can share with us.
Well, let's think of design as informed intuition for a second.
Like that.
Which basically means, okay, it's informed intuition, and intuition is key, although we have all kinds of computational tools and cognitive technologies. So there's something called intuition, design intuition. And, well, we can educate this. We can train our intuition in a way. I'm doubting if we can really improve our human intuition. While on the other hand, we have, when we say informed intuition, we have information. And I think that's the interesting part right now. So we need to reflect on how intuition is or will be informed in the future, because I think that's the big change. And AI has this interesting and quite critical but also fascinating feature that it goes very deep, down to our very basic culture techniques of writing, calculating, reading. And I think this is where it affects also the intuition and where it affects the core of our discipline. Because AI is changing the way we used to read, we used to write, to calculate anyway. So I think this deep level where AI operates in a way, this is the interesting level we have to think about when it comes to education. And there's this interesting, let's say, also the beauty of a slow medium in architecture is that it's not always about changing everything immediately. Because if you have a look at the history of tech and architecture over the last 50 years, okay, every Monday there's a new tool. So do we need to change our curriculum every Monday? Well, no. But the art, in a way, is the challenge basically is to combine an old medium with a new medium. So the curriculum, in a way, has the big challenge now. How can we combine, let's say, hand drawing and AI features? I would not skip the hand drawing, for example, just because it's old or whatever. It's basic, right? It's fundamental. But by adding a bit of AI seasoning, drawing becomes an interesting topic. And I think this is where we are right now. So we have to learn to rethink and reinvent the fundamentals of our discipline. And if AI, can help us doing that, it's fine.
Yeah, I think very important things that you mentioned here. First of all, the definition itself, I think, makes things a bit more clear. Informed intuition, and you mentioned that the intuition comes from different mediums. For example, drawing has been there long in architecture curriculum, that the students need to be able to project basically the outside into an abstract form, which could be drawing of the whole building or a floor plan or perspective or whatever. And then this intuition, because it's ingrained in the human brain, it's not going to change very fast. So we need to we keep nourishing basically this skill into our intuition the way we used to do in architecture curriculum. And then it's this information, which to me it's also sort of information hasn't changed. I mean, we're still living in a physical environment that we do. However, the amount of information that we can absorb now is different.
Yeah.
And still, this information needs to be absorbed by the designer itself, even though that the flow has changed. So we need to think about how to adapt this flow to our human brain, to our trained designer brain, that we can absorb more information and at the same time produce better design using that. And I think, looking at this as well, a new tool, basically a new tool for information, right? So not a new tool per se for design, but a new tool for the designer to be able to think and navigate, basically.
Yeah.
So a new way to read and collect information. So based on your research into this conceptual structure behind the design culture, how can AI support this new form into maybe something bigger? So you say the building is itself, it's not going to change. Is that true? Are we coming maybe to a new form of spatial intelligence with this new tool? Is it something that you can foresee, that we are going to design very differently because of, I would say, a tool which is not really at the forefront of the design, really working in the backstage of the designer mind, really working with the designer? Does this going to change really the way we design the spaces?
Yeah, so let's say you mentioned two things. The first one is you talk about tools, ask about tools, and the second one was about buildings. Well, let's take the tools for a second, because you said AI is a tool, but it's not really a tool, and I agree. It's kind of
fundamental tool.
It's a fundamental tool. It's kind of in between. I think it's more than a tool. It's more than tools, and in a way, I have a feeling AI, whatever it is it's more like the latest chapter in the long history of knowledge. So I think AI is more a new way of knowing rather than a tool which needs to be applied. Well, for many people, AI is a tool and can be used as a tool in the everyday pumping culture.
But that's the easiest way, right?
That's the easiest way, you know, and we're not interested in the easiest way.
No, exactly. Because you said knowledge, can you compare it to the printing industry? What has happened to the architecture and, let's say, the spread of the design, of the word, of the ideology of the biggest architects back then, like 100 years ago, when the printing industry came? Because it's about scaling the knowledge.
Yes, it's scaling the knowledge. Very good, Sarah. And I think, okay, let's think about the new way of knowledge. I think one feature of the new knowledge culture or knowledge regime, if you want to be more critical, is that it's based, many times it's based on summaries. So we are in a post-network society. Everything is connected, which creates a huge amount of data. And now the machines basically did what we should do. They use the data to learn, right? So here we are. We have learning machines. They can use the entire world to get smarter in a way. But the way of smartness, and I'm not criticizing it as in a cheap way, but is that it's summarizing things for us very quickly, right? And I think this feature of summarizing becomes in a way one of the key operational mechanics of AI and of the new knowledge regime. And I think this is something, for example, which is totally different to the 50s and 60s, where knowledge was basically diagrammatic or very local in a way, and the network society was still a theory developed by, let's say, people like scholars like McLuhan talking about the global village. Everyone will be connected. Now we are connected. Well, yes, yeah. So what, right? So I think the new knowledge regime is something we need to constantly reflect. And I think the idea of summarizing information is one of the key mechanics of this regime. Well, then you talk about the building. Well, yeah, is the building really changing? Well, I don't know. For sure, there are sensors all over. So maybe the building in the future will be like a Tesla, constantly recording,
Yeah.
our environment. Of course, more like the car than the CEO, in a way. But in a way, well, there's this period in architecture history. It's not that far away. Let's say the 90s, where architects, in a way, misinterpret new technology with the idea of form. So just because there's a new tech, a new tool, doesn't mean that everything needs to change immediately in the physical space. So it doesn't mean that the building should look like blobs, just because it's possible to use parametric tools. It's. I mean, look at this room. There's still geometry. And I remember, let's say, where in the 90s, where all this, the beginning of the parametric shift in a way, of the parametric turn, many architects thought, well, yeah, we were living blobs because now we can shape everything. Everything is blobby, right? Well, this was a very productive misunderstanding of computational tools in a way. So I'm not a fan of a literal of applying a new tool to form immediately. And I think AI is not about form finding at all. It's not about design. It's more about the conditions of design. And I think that this is way more interesting and way more complex than, well, there's a tool which allows me to kind of, develop all kinds of shape forms.
I think this was actually the topic I wanted to talk to you about, because in the essay that you had in the Hey Computer exhibition, and this reimagining iconic buildings, and from what you just talked about, I see these periods of hypes within architecture. So we have hype over something, and it's like post computational design. At some point, I think it will be like post AI design. But in between these post periods, do you think that we will observe change in the forms of the building? So, for example, from this exhibition, there are this futuristic form of buildings which are really eye-catching, I would say. Like, this might be taste, but and I think we also see students playing with these tools, and not only for what we thought it's deeper, that's navigating, searching, informing intuition, but also as a playground. And this might change also the way we imagine the built environment. To, I don't know, to match what or to fit what, but to sort of fit our imagination of the future. What do you think? Will we have like buildings which look like more of these AI generated buildings? I don't know, in the next, building is a slow process, as you said, so it takes a lot of time, like 5 years to start designing, and maybe it's so might be we are already over the AI by then. But then, do you imagine that? Do you think that's going to happen?
Well, for sure, there are many smart and brilliant art historians out there, and for sure, this is one of their key questions. you want to identify like the building where you can say this is AI style.
Yes,
Well,
exactly.
I'm not a fan of that, to be
So
honest.
the Tesla is an AI style, for example, right?
But I think that's okay, and for sure, thinking of the let's say the AI image culture and the techniques developed over the last years, this generative AI. Well, for a moment, I think there was indeed a renaissance of the idea of style. And I think for art history, this was quite interesting because, suddenly style is back. And style usually, is something which is kind of, how to say, since many, many years, decades, it's a very controversial concept. And after postmodernism, basically everything is possible. So there's no dominant style anymore. But nevertheless, I think there was a renaissance. And suddenly you could see many, many conference papers or books talking or addressing the question of style and tech. Well, that's one part, right? And I think this was okay. Then in architecture, we have to distinguish between the image and the building. And I think the image itself is an interesting product, kind of snappy, but also a bit cheesy in a way, because it lacks spatial complexity. So from an architecture point of view, a floor plan, for example, has a great spatial complexity and there's spatial information in it: scale, dimension, proportion, usability, standardization, norms. Well, an image is a quick, you can swipe to the next building.
It's an ad.
It's kind of an add-on in a way. But of course, it's easy to criticize, and so I think it's way more important to let's say talk about the good things in a way, to be critically optimistic. And this is, this entire AI image culture brought something back to architecture, which I think is quite interesting right now. And this is the archive, the idea of in a way of training data, of physical training data. So what's the archive we usually use to design? What is the amount of references we like to use when we design? So I think the entire generative AI turn or wave, personally, was more about how can we rediscover archives in the age of AI, rather than generating another stylish, shapy image, right?
Yeah. So going from process to the product, which is building, and then coming back again, again referencing to the Biennale, and I was just looking at the contrast between, for example, the exhibition in Giardini and Arsenale. It seems that also this form, it's not only in the final product, which is the building, but also the presentation of the knowledge.
Yes.
So the way that the architects present their design knowledge now has been influenced by this technology. So what is your reflection on that? How do you see also like this exhibition culture, how people actually approach public? Because I think this feedback you mentioned earlier, it's about, the society gives feedback, depends on the medium of the design knowledge representation. People are coming and looking at, let's say, very diverse topic, but still you see this thematic way of representing this knowledge to the public. And this is different from I think what it used to be, like in a culture of this knowledge representation.
Yeah.
We have a knowledge representation in computer as well, but I think this is a bit different. And how do you see this?
Well, I think this great tradition of curating exhibitions for the public is absolutely key for our discipline and needs to be reinventing, from time to time. And the Biennale is maybe the most popular example. the key aspect of creating exhibition is sharing knowledge. So I think, in a way, you could say exhibitions are also part of the open science idea, in a way. Although architecture is not science, but it's open to the public and should be shared to the public. The public needs to be informed. So for me, the idea of sharing is interesting, of course. And I think the Biennale, yeah, it's a popular, maybe the most popular platform for architecture right now.
And that's really like the vitrine of how the exhibition and the curation and archives, etc., are going to be, right? Is this something that we could say, okay, this is the trend for the next, I don't know, 2 years, that, well, the way we are going to present this knowledge in the Het Nieuw Institute or other museums, etc., about architecture, this is the new platform, basically. Lots of screens, data in scale. So we also see it here in the screens. There's lots of floor plan in the form of a data set, and really trying to confront the public with this flow of information in any form. Is this a new way? Is it how do you see? Is this like going to be there for a long time, that we use AI to be able to also represent design knowledge?
Well, I think I hope that exhibitions will be there forever, and I think it's also easy, again, and easy to criticize the Biennale as a company or as a big business model. That's okay, but the basic idea, we have to acknowledge that it's the place where we go to see what colleagues are doing, or where we come together as a global community in a way. And so sharing knowledge, yes. And I think AI impacts a bit the way we create exhibition, because if something is data driven or AI generated, if you exhibit this to the public, you still need to explain the technology you used. And I think that's an interesting to do. It's an interesting challenge for us also as architects, to explain AI from an architectural point of view. How do we use AI? So think of an exhibition where you, in a way, present the product, the resources, but also you need to invent, in a way, your presentation to explain the entire process, the step-by-step process to the public, because you really want to inform society how you designed something. And I think the idea of explaining tech is a very interesting, let's say, maybe future field for architects.
That's great, Georg, because that's exactly what I was thinking about.
Yes.
Because I felt like really walking through these different projects and lacking the architectural knowledge to understand really what is behind it. What I felt was a new role for architects, because tech people might not be good at explaining tech to public, because, well, there are so many like details, ingredients that you might need to actually cover before explaining things to the public. And it seems that architects are very good at this, because they have been this interface for a long time, to really connect the public to the living space. And now tech becoming the new media for their design knowledge, they need to explain the tech as well.
Yes.
And this seems to be very interesting to me, that all these platforms and the way they operate also becomes part of the architectural knowledge. And this is exactly where you talk about how architecture and technology is shaping each other. So, and I hear also from many colleagues in computer science that it seems that the designer have a better way of communicating tech complexities. So this might be actually a new role for an architect, to be able to use basically this general, I would say, skill into connecting to the public, also to close the gap.
Well, there's one interesting question I was always wondering. think of the last 10, 15 years for this amazing thing called TED Talks.
Yeah.
TED Talk.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's great, and in a way, I love many TED Talks. But the TED Talk itself is about a story, to tell a story in 18 minutes about a very complex topic, science or tech, basically. Well, I think there's a reason why TED Talks are very popular in California or Silicon Valley, because exactly as you said, as a tech person, the biggest weakness is to wrap tech into a story. So I think this was the biggest to-do list for Silicon Valley, to reinvent themselves as storytellers. And they did great, right?
Yeah.
They did great. To sell tech, you need a story. Well, architects are trained storytellers. You need to explain your project 2,000 times to your client or to stakeholders. So storytelling is part of design itself, is part of our discipline. And I think what's interesting for us is now, how can we, well, it's a funny question, but how can we overcome the anxiety of tech and data? Because in architecture, there's still this gap which need to bridge somehow between, well, here's the physical world, and then there's this data world, or this is the analog world, and then there's this digital. So here's society, and then there is tech. Here is, I don't know, culture, and then there is science. And I think this is the biggest trap and the biggest weakness of our own discipline, is that we still separate tech from design, or culture from tech. Tech is culture and culture is tech. Anyway, this is what makes us human. And I think to tell a story about AI and to explain AI, we need to overcome this gap, or we need to work on this, overcoming this gap. Otherwise, we will be still the architects, which need, in a way, another person to explain the tools. And I think the architect or the designer, in a way, should be able to explain the tech we use.
Great. So we need to teach these skills to the next generation of
Good luck.
architecture. And these are also like the biggest question that the students have when they come to us. And the tech anxiety that you mentioned, and all the anxiety that comes with the change in the AI, seems to be this very fast change that people are starting being anxious about. Okay, what's the future of our job? What do we need to teach my kids? So that they can find a job in, I don't know, 20 years from now. And here we are at the Faculty of Architecture and the Delft School of Architecture. And we need to basically design also the future of these new workers, these new architects that are going to shape our world. So how do you think that we need to recalibrate this the architectural school? Let's say Delft as one of the iconic architectural school in the world. Where do we start? What do we need to think about? And as more of, let's say, visionary educators and visionary architects, because the architects also want the new generation of the people who are going to hire to be skillful and fit to the new condition here. And they're constantly asking, okay, what kind of skills do we need to teach to the students? And students are also anxious about, okay, what do I need to learn? Where do I need to focus? What is your advice?
Well, education is always a battlefield. So, but let's think out of the box for a second. I could imagine that we need to listen to the students more than ever. Many times they know more than we know. Just because we know something as educators doesn't mean that we need to teach this to the students.
Yeah.
So together with the students, in a way, we are challenged to find out what is the future knowledge. And if this collaborative adventure is about co-education, open education, when it comes to data literacy, for example, I'm totally okay with it. Why not running a lab together with students? I mean, it would be great, to be very honest. Of course, I'm a big fan of conceptual thinking, of critical thinking. This is something I would say is the fundamental, part of every curriculum. Could be tool 1, could be tool 2. Okay, it's interesting for the market in a way. But I think the mindset is interesting, and how to develop a mindset for the age of AI. That's the big question. But I would be very open, very experimental, in a way. It's about data ethics, for example. So when it comes to data ethics, for example, it's usually, when you think of data literacy, you could practice data literacy, you could theorize data literacy, and I think the next step could be to experience data literacy. So why not developing all kinds of new formats, how to experience the everyday dataness in a way, right? So the inhabiting data idea would help a lot in a way to set the new tone for curriculum.
Yeah, so this new data mindset, and this is basically why this lab is also here to really experiment with, if we want to adapt data practices outside architecture to architecture, what do we need to innovate? And what you mentioned is really co-designing these practices together with the new generation, which I struggle with it at the same time because of this change and adaptation, etc. Because now the generation gap seems to be even bigger when it comes to even technology. I've been in tech for a while, and then I feel like the new generation of tech people also have very different skills, very different mindset. But there should be a core at some point that you can hang on it, because otherwise it would be very shaky.
So I agree.
What is this core?
Well,
we need to stick to it.
Okay, let's mention one of my favorite anecdotes. It's about the core, but also how to shake the core a bit and how to tell the story a bit different. There's Noam Chomsky, the famous scientist, writer. Was also part of one of the, let's say, key figures in cognitive science since the 50s and 60s at MIT. There's this anecdote that he used to start his lectures at MIT by asking the audience any questions. Are there any questions? And then he built, in a way, his lecture based on the questions. And usually we do the other way around. We tell a story to the students, it's a monologue, and then we ask the students, do you have any comments?
It's already biasing them into to the box.
Yes. And by flipping the coin in a way, turning the procedure upside down, I think it's way more open and also experimental. And I think we need to be a bit more Chomsky in a way right now to deal with the complexity and the pace of development.
That takes courage, I would say. So to make yourself as an educator vulnerable, basically to something that you don't know.
Yes.
Do you think that we have this courage in Delft?
Yes.
So that's basically our USP. We have to experiment, and we have to let the students to actually guide us through this process. But then, what is it for us as an educator here to give to the students? Can they just self-organize themselves into this? This is also very important because they have now powerful tools for education. Sometimes I just feel if I give the lecture that I gave 1 year ago to the students, all the materials that they can actually find and in a dialogue with ChatGPT or any kind of conversational chatbot. So as an educators, we had a question about, okay, what the students need to learn to be able to adapt to the future market. But now the question is for us. So my question is, as an educator, and you also have seen a lot of institutes, you have worked in different institutes around the world, and you have seen like different cultures in, let's say, teaching architecture students. So what do we need to basically learn or update ourselves as an educator to be able to still attract the students to come to Delft to study architecture?
Yeah, thank you. That's a very small question, but of course, it's the one of the big challenging questions right now. Don't have the answer, but based on my experience over the last years here in Delft, there's one of the features which I very much like is that I think it's about closing the loop. So education usually is, based on many questions, many references, histories, theories, syllabi, whatever, projects. And I think what we need to do now, more than for the last 20 years, is that we need to together with the students close the loop and go back to the built environment in a way. So while, for example, in the 80s and 90s, you could talk about the virtual reality, and then this is it, right? And I think now we need to close the loop. We need to kind of loop back to the built environment, basically because it's physical, the world is physical, but also there's this thing called climate change, which has it's about footprints in a way. It's about energy transition. It's about data centers. All these things, they have a physical impact. And I think this was missing over the last 20, 30 years and the entire digital design culture debate. And by bringing back the physical, dimension of the built environment into the data discussion, I think that's one of the interesting topics right now.
Okay, interesting. You cannot really fake the spatial experience, sort of, even though through a verbal, let's say, articulation of the space, etc. So I think maybe that's the agency of
No, you can fake a
teachers.
story and you can fake news, but you cannot fake a building.
Great ending, Georg. Thanks a lot. To be continued.
Thank you, Seyran.
Thank you for watching or listening to this episode. If you have questions for my guests and me, please comment them down below. If you would like to learn more about me, Seyran, please contact me at s.khademi@tuddelft.nl. If you would like to learn more about our sponsor, the TU Delft AI Initiative, please visit their website at ai.tudelft.nl.